Hello and welcome back to the Discover History YouTube channel. In this video I want to talk about a self-propelled field gun. This is the British Sexton. I'm going to end the video on this today, and there's a good reason for that. If you've been watching my videos on my D-Day research, part 7 is going to be a dedicated video to this machine as it supported 69th Brigade throughout D-Day. Field guns have played an extremely important role on the battlefield since the 17th century right up to modern day. If we take a Napoleonic cannon as an example for this really early period, all the way up to the 20th century almost, they are on wooden carriages. The barrels are made of brass or bronze. They're relatively short ranged. They fired a cannonball, canister or shrapnel. They were direct fire machines. You didn't use them to fire over the heads of your own soldiers typically, unless you were on higher ground. And they were muzzle loaders. They were loaded from the front, push the stuff down the barrel, and when you fired it, the recoil forced the gun back. It rolled backwards. So every time you fired it, you had to get your men to move it forward, reload, fire, it rolled back again, and you had to keep repeating that. To move them around, of course, this is the age of the horse, and as you can see from this picture, this photo of this, a model of a Napoleonic horse artillery piece. You've got a team of horses, they're pulling a limber with the ammunition in it, and then the field gun is attached, the cannon is attached to the back of that limber. When you get into position, you have to unhook that cannon, turn it round, get it in position, load and fire, and get your horses and your limber out of the way a little bit. Now, things didn't change throughout the 19th century. If you see that, look at this picture of this American Civil War cannon, basically the same as the Napoleonic one. The big difference is that although bronze cannons, brass cannons are still used, better casting procedures, better casting technology, iron guns are now more common. They are stronger, they can fire further because the cannon can take the more explosive forces. And also, what I didn't say was, in the Napoleonic era, cannon size was usually a 6-pounder, a 9-pounder. The largest one on the field was a 12-pounder. In the American Civil War, larger cannons started to be used. The Army of the Potomac in particular had some 20-pounder Parrots, some 30-pounder Parrots, even 4.5-inch ordnance guns that accompanied the field army. They're still cumbersome things, but the cannons were getting larger. But really nothing changed. That cannon was still loaded from the front. It was a muzzle loader. It still fell back when it was fired. It was only as the Industrial Revolution kicked in even more towards the end of the 19th century that changes started to happen. Breech loading came in. Instead of loading the gun from the front, you had a breech at the back and you stuck your shell in there and fired it that way. Still rolled back. And then there was a massive revolution. The French developed their 75mm quick firer with hydraulic recoil. This meant that when the gun was fired, the barrel shot back, but all that recoil energy was absorbed. The gun didn't move. The barrel did, the gun didn't. But even then, to move these cannon around, these field guns around, you were still relying on horses. And that was the same all the way up, including the First World War. Now, cannon field guns, their range increased because of the hydraulic recoil, the stronger cannon, shells, not cannonballs. But you can see from this picture of this German field gun, it's basically the same as an American Civil War cannon, a Napoleonic cannon. It's just it's got new technology in it. It's got that recoil, it's got the hydraulic recoil. That means it stays in position once it's fired. Still, it was dragged by horses. You had to move them around by horses. After the First World War, mechanisation came in. You could start using tractors first and then lorries to tow your guns around. So yeah, in the 1930s, and even throughout the war, Second World War, you're still towing field guns around. Now that's fine, but your armies are now moving faster. And when it came to the Second World War and the Germans release their blitzkrieg, their tanks are shifting fast. The infantry's got to keep up. It might be in armoured personnel carriers, might be in lorries. Field guns being dragged by horses are slow. You can't keep up with the advance. So what the Germans did, as well as towing their light field guns into action, they developed a tracked version, a self-propelled version. Based on their Panzer I and their Panzer II, they stuck a 15cm infantry support gun, which is what these field guns do. They support the infantry on the ground, onto a tank chassis that could keep up with the advance. When the British encountered these guns in the desert in 1941, they were quite impressed with them, and they realised the need for themselves to have these guns. Now, we didn't have a dedicated self-propelled gun, obviously. We had what was probably the best gun of the war, the 25-pounder howitzer. That was a towed field gun, towed behind a limber, behind a small truck. The British needed a self-propelled gun, so they developed, as a stopgap, the Bishop. It's based on a Valentine tank with a 25-pounder mounted on top and then a large box to hold the crew. Bit limited. Its range was reduced because it couldn't elevate as much as a normal field gun could. And it was very high profile. It's a very high fighting compartment on top. Not good in a desert situation where you really want to be hulled down so the enemy can't see you. So yeah, the British developed the Bishop. The Bishop entered service in July 1942, but was quickly superseded by an American machine. In September 1942, through Lend-Lease, we were supplied with the American M7 Priest. That's what we called it in our service anyway. Armed with a 105mm howitzer, based on a Sherman chassis. So very reliable, good gun on it. And that is what equipped the majority of our self-propelled field artillery units all the way up and beyond D-Day. Prior to D-Day, the British developed what I showed earlier on, the Sexton, using that 25-pounder gun. Good reasons for this. We have lots of 25-pounders, so we've got lots of ammunition. With D-Day coming up, the Americans needed all their ammunition for their own guns, so supply would have been more difficult, getting it to the British. It's taken away from the Americans, so it made sense to standardise our equipment using what we'd already got, which is a 25-pounder, fantastic gun. So on D-Day, we had a lot of priests still in our self-propelled units, but they were eventually superseded themselves by the Sexton, which became the standard self-propelled gun of the British Army from D-Day onwards, and even into the 1950s. It was taken out of service in 1956, I do believe. After that, we developed the Abbott, much larger self-propelled gun. But I'm going to end on the Sexton. Like I say, that is the gun that supported 69th Brigade on D-Day, throughout D-Day, a lot of fire missions. Advantage of self-propelled, of course. Again, it can keep up with the advance. These later guns, of course, with their recoil, their hydraulic recoil, they've got a lot longer range. I think the 25-pounder got a 12,000 yard range instead of a couple of hundred yards of something that was on a Napoleonic battlefield. And now you didn't have to have these at the forefront of your battle. They could sit back and give supporting fire over your own troops without being exposed to enemy fire. So that's it. That's the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I say, look out for part 7 of my D-Day research, which will feature the Sexton, and I will see you soon. Bye.